fast and slow. What are these words but the makings for the progress of movement? With love will they each serve to reveal a level of progression. When perceived within the vicinity one to the other, will comparison come? Will comparison within the external come? Will comparison within the self come? And with this comparison, will there underlie a subtle judgment of self? When this judgment has been rendered, is there then a desire to direct proper focus to those areas wherein inadequacy has been determined? With love, we wish to remind all in receipt of this sharing that the progress of life will flow in divine alignment with the conscious level of awareness one has chosen to embody within each now moment. Therefore, know this life journey as revealed to be unique, and but reference wherein one may glean example in attempting to traverse one's own journey of self-discovery. With love, having clearly established this as the intention of this sacred space, do we now invite you to travel with us, expanding into the limitless possibility of all that is, as we hear firsthand the becoming of Phyllis Anne Douglass. Receive, 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 receive.
Well, this all really began when I was born. I remember being born. And I'm mentioning this because of what happened when I was born. So right before I came down the birth canal, there was this just like lightning flash of bright light. And I was speaking, my soul was speaking to someone and saying, I don't know why I said I would do this again, right? And then after that, I started down the birth canal, and that was it. That was, and I still, that, it's interesting because that came back to me later in life, and I went, oh my goodness, because I was told, you know. So I have always been surrounded by angels since I was 4 years old, but I didn't realize that they were angels. They were kind of like invisible playmates. And the first time that I could acknowledge that, oh, they're angels from that childlike perspective, was when I went to Sunday school. And I had my little Bible, and they were talking about angels, and there were you know, photos of or pictures of angels in there. And then I realized, oh, because the beings that were coming to me, you know, they had like these long gowns and they had wings and everything, right? Because they knew that coming in, you know, that persona per se, it was like she would recognize, okay, we're angels. Because now I can recognize the frequency of them when they come in, and I don't have to see them. And they can speak to me, because it takes an awful lot of energy to do that. So I kept thinking about how much energy they were expending to do that throughout my entire childhood. They were always, always there. And they've always been messengers, guides, protectors, and teachers to me. And I just never knew why. It was so they presented me with experiences throughout my childhood that they never let go too far, that I would be hurt or something, because I experienced, you know, ghosts, spirits coming, speaking to me and all of that all the time. I didn't get a lot of sleep sometimes because they would just pop up. And, you know, I used to sleep under my blanket with a flashlight because the room would be so full, and I just really didn't know what was going on. Or I would have these spirits. So, I mean, that was my childhood. But I would have like positive things happen, but also negative spirits would come. And The one situation that I had with a more kind of negative entity was there's that point where you're kind of half awake, half asleep, because I knew something was happening, and something had grabbed my right ankle and it was pulling me down the bed. And I was fighting for my life. I think that was about 11 then. I was literally fighting for my life. And I lunged, because it was those old lamps with a little pull down string. I just lunged at my lamp and I pulled it, and then it stopped when the light came on. But the top mattress was like 3/4 of the way off the bed. The blankets were strewn. And when I pulled my ankle up, there were fingerprints. Uh, and so that freaked me out. Right? But stuff like that have weird things happen. And so I asked later, I was kind of like, why did I have to go through those types of experiences? And because of the work that I do and the level of the work that I do, they told me that I needed to have the knowledge and first experience of those type of situations that other people actually endure, so that you really have to kind of have a knowledge of what other people are coming to you with. I guess that's the easiest way to say it. Yeah. And then later in life, they had me watch. They said, go watch the paranormal movies. I was like, I don't want to watch the paranormal movies. But they said, no, go watch. I've watched every paranormal movie. And what happened when I was sitting there was like, oh, they were showing me this isn't just a movie. These are things that actually occur in life to people. Maybe not you, but to people. And there were a couple circumstances in there that I could relate to. So, but it was really another teaching moment. I was like, okay, I understand. It was the understanding and acknowledging that this reality where I'm seeing you and we're having a conversation is not all that there is, right? And so they wanted me to be aware of, there's multiple dimensions, there's parallel universes and parallel lives and all of this, and all is happening now, right? At the same time. And so that was kind of interesting training grounds, I guess, as I was growing up. But I never understood, I speak an angelical language. I've always, even when I was little, I would just kind of bust out in song. My sister, my parents would say, yeah, you would just sing what they would call gobbledygook. It wasn't understandable. But I hadn't realized that I was actually, speaking a light language even at that time. And I grew up to be an artist. I was always drawing and all of that. And, creating art in some way, shape, or form. And I ended up going to college and becoming a professional dancer. But what I realized was doing art and being able to go on a stage and perform was a measure of sanity for me, because it allowed me to be someone other than who I am. It allowed me to kind of go into a whole different persona and exist in that moment. And it was really beautiful when I actually figured that out. I was kind of like, why am I an artist? Why? And I draw and I paint and I write and all of this. And it's really just a way to express the totality of who you are, to be able to do art, to create art. And so eventually I got into Toltec Shamanism. And the Toltecs, what was so beautiful about that and synchronicities is that they believe in creating life as art. That's the key premise. And so I've studied Toltec Shamanism since 2017. And it's also about developing who you are. There isn't any type of doctrine or dogma or anything that goes with it. It's just a way of being, a way of existing in the world. And that's pretty much how it had happened early on. And one of the key moments was I just accepted, oh, this is me. I don't really know what it means. I don't know what I'm supposed to do with this, right? It was never really apparent. It was kind of like I was, they said, go take a Reiki class. And I think that was just to really familiarize myself with working with energy and things, right? So I did all of these classes. I don't do any of that work any longer. But what I realized was it was kind of an entry point for me. It was a key to open the next door. And I kept receiving these keys and opening up that next door, and, this unfoldment was happening. But I still didn't know what that meant. And a friend of mine invited me up to Mount Shasta. There's a woman up there that was teaching a class. It was like an energy healing type of class, similar to Reiki, but she called it like Shambhala Reiki. And there were supposed to be 9 people. And there were 2, my friend and I. Nobody else showed up. And so when that happened, because that had happened prior, I always knew that spirit was coming in and there was something that I was to receive, right? So it was just the 2 of us. And she said, well, I don't know why I'm being asked to do this, because I can do halo openings. And I'm being told that I should do a halo opening for the 2 of you. And I went first. So I remember lying down and she was doing something. She put her hands on my head and then I was gone. Right. And all of a sudden I was up in this beautiful, bright space with the angels, and we were talking, and I was talking to them in my frequency-based language. We were having a conversation. They were explaining all of this stuff to me, whatever it was. And it was a beautiful space. I didn't really want to leave because that's where I am. That's where I belong. And so the woman, after she did the halo opening and she couldn't bring me back, it took her 20 minutes. And finally I felt someone like tugging on my foot. She was shaking my foot. And so then I came back into my body, and I was confused. And she said, oh my goodness. She goes, I couldn't get you back. And so I started talking to her, but it was in my angelic language. It had all come in fully, right? And I was kind of like, because I couldn't speak English. 8.5 hours. I could understand English. People would say something to me, to the point where we had to go out to dinner, and I was writing in a notebook, or I was rubbing, like, oh, yeah, I have laryngitis or something. I can't talk. It was really funny. It wasn't funny because I kept thinking, okay, God, I can't go home speaking this language. Not that my husband wouldn't understand, first of all. And it was kind of like, but 8.5 hours later, I started like drawing or something. And then my friend asked me something, and I just answered, and I went, oh, thank you. Thank you, God. I could speak. But since that time, it had set in like the full ability to speak in that angelical language. And people speak of light language, and I had called it light language, and they're like, well, okay, you could call it angelical light language, but it's really it's Adamic language. It's the first language of God, which is like frequency based. Sometimes I call it the language of God's light. They'll have me, do that. So there are different levels of light language and so forth. So that's really kind of when that all started. And I just remember working, I got into doing sound healing, for many years. I hauled around gongs and singing bowls and all of that. And I remember working with a client in an energy healing session. And then the angel came in and said, we're going to have you begin to sing to your client. And so I kind of leaned down and said, apparently I'm going to sing to you. And they were like, okay, whatever. So I started to sing, like tone. And they were saying, oh my God, they gave me a beautiful testimony about how affecting that was, like what happened to them, their experience. And since that point, it was really, I think, being in Mount Shasta and getting my halo open, and that whole thing kind of really started to solidify my relationship with the angels. And then I began to, be able to write in light language and symbology and so forth, and to translate, what I was saying and all of that. And it really hasn't been that long. I was told to record some music, my first album. It's a good album, wasn't a great album, but it was the first thing I ever did, and it was with Elohim. And it's kind of like it has, I feel like within the last, COVID was like a reset. but during that period of time, I had some health issues and so forth, and they were really working on me. It's like it's all about the physical vehicle now, because you need to shore up your physical vehicle. You're going to live a long life, and now is the time that humanity needs you. Now is the time when you really have to step forward in your full power and do this work. And that's not that long ago. I was kind of like, well, why did you have to wait till I was so much older? And it was kind of like the timing really wasn't right. It's really now, because you see all of these things happening in society and the government and with the earth and all of this, and we're at this culminating point now, and this is really an auspicious lifetime to be alive, because everybody who has come into this lifetime has a purpose. Hopefully they know their purpose, they're working on knowing what that purpose is. But some of those people are just here to be a light, to be a foundation for other people that are doing work. And so it's really about recognizing and acknowledging that. And at a certain point, several years ago, I used to work a lot with stones and oracle cards and all of that type of thing. And the angels took that away. They said, okay, it is about direct communication with God. And that is what you need to acknowledge at this point. So no more tools, no more cards and things like that. And I remember I loved these. I'd always wanted to learn tarot, and I loved these cards. And they're like, don't buy the cards. I bought the cards. And so, I was trying to like use it. They were just dead. Everything was dead. Nothing would work. I got nothing. I was just like, and so I was like, fine. So I really started these very specific meditations where it was really about sitting within the light of God to commune. And with that, I got downloads and all of that. And it was shoring up that direct channel of communication. I mean, everything is God. And I also had to release a lot of, I had a religious upbringing with all of this happening. My mother was Pentecostal Baptist and then switched to Methodist. So I got kind of both of those. And that I got kicked out of Sunday school. I did. It was funny because I kept asking these questions that were a little, they couldn't answer them because, they were trying to tell me that, God would punish me basically. I was a sinner, and all this. I was like, I've never sinned in my life. I'm 5, I'm 6, it's just I've never done anything. Thinking about that Tootsie Roll Pop that I once stole. So I was kind of like, oh no, I'm going to hell right now. But I kept asking these questions. Well, that doesn't make sense and I was pulling from, universal knowledge, right? That was coming in, not really understanding all of that, but getting those tidbits that were saying, okay, don't listen to them. This is truth, right? And I do not know why, but until I was 15, and there's a reason for that, I never shared any of this that was happening. I never said a word. Nothing.
As we are here, shall we detail a story which shall permit the listener to glean a clear understanding of what it is to withhold one's truth from the world? Hear, see, feel, and know. Within a space of time not known to many, there existed a man, and this man had the inclination to begin the establishment of a new way of producing that which he intended to make available for production and consumption in order to create a life for himself and his family. This man was an innovator, an inventor, a person within whom existed the power to create, and create he did, but not in the way of general consensus nor convention. This man was a seer, a hearer, a perceiver. He possessed the ability to simply know, and over the course of his life had he perfected the art of requesting and receiving that which he desired in the way of idea innovation by simply releasing into the ether his request and awaiting the response within his own thoughtscape. As he produced and sold and produced, did many approach desiring to understand his methodology, his procedures, his tactics, for mastering not only the creation of a thing, but also his penchant for the supply, the management of resources, and the distribution of said thing. And within one such opportune moment, he froze. Within an instant, did he see the laughs, jeers, and stares as he recited the truth of his success. He saw the confused faces as he envisioned sharing of his joy-filled heart, how the creations seemingly created themselves at his request to know and discover the best ways of its creation, supply, and distribution. He saw this, and he allowed himself to feel the emotion of rejection. And so, to avoid all such relative potentials, he instead chose to remain silent, offering but a tight-lipped conventional response as anticipated by the questioner. Within this moment, did he lose himself to the perception of a world for whom he had given the best of his creative fruit. Thereafter, did he in turn distance himself from the source of his own inspiration. Innovation failed to come as creativity moved further and further from his reach. As his creativity waned, so did the excitement for that which he sold, soon rendering him penniless, with nothing to show for his past efforts but heartache and despair. This is the story of one who negated himself for the acceptance of the crowd, who chose to lose himself to the acceptance and conditioning of a world standard for which he was never intended to align. This is the story of many who lose themselves at the cost of remaining silent regarding their truth. Our encouragement to you is this: with love, from a space of heart-centered openness, share your stories, share your dreams, share your aspirations and desires, for as you do, is there a safety created within your radiance. The listener is inspired to do so in turn, creating a ripple effect wherein unconditional acceptance and non-judgment is welcomed and nurtured. Share of your true essence, as this is the path to liberation from all which has served to bind. Now, we welcome you to continue upon this journey of discovery, as Phyllis shares with us more of the beauty of her unfolding. Listen as we return.
There was one point, well, when I was 10 years old, I had double pneumonia and almost died, I think. I got asthma. It was this whole thing. And I remember I was really, really sick. And I was upstairs in bed. And I floated out of my body, and I went downstairs, and I was hovering above the kitchen table, and I was listening to what my parents were saying. And my mother was saying, we really need to take her to the hospital or something because it's whatever. So I'm listening to that conversation. And then my father said, well, I'm going to go get her and we'll take her to the hospital. So my father left the kitchen, so I'm floating. I went back I went back into my body. And I was like, hi, Daddy, you're going to take me to the hospital? I was like sitting there and and I told him, yeah, I heard you talking. Because I came down and I heard you talking. And my dad kind of looked at me odd. It was never mentioned. It was just one of those looks. It was very strange, I remember. And then when I was 15... my grandmother came, she was one of the key things too. I'd forgotten about that. She came to me when she was 15 because she was transitioning. And it was 10:30 at night. And she woke me up and she said, I realized when I was making my transition that I am a seer, but I was never able to really apply any of that to my life, right? But I saw that you are a seer. And I need to let you know that. So she told me, you are a seer. And it was just, I'm getting chills now. And I was like, okay. And she said, and your father has a ring, a diamond ring that I told him to give you when you turned 16. And I said, okay. And then she was off. I woke, it was, I woke up that morning and I went to school and I came home and my dad was home and I was like, well, why are you home so early? And he said, well, I have to tell you something. Your grandmother passed away, right? That was his mother. And I went, oh, I know. She came to me last night and she sang Nearer My God to Thee. That was her favorite song. And then she had a message for me, right? And she said that you had a ring to give me when I turned 16 years old. And I got the look again. My father didn't speak to me for 2 days. It was just kind of this quiet, like something's going on in his mind. He did say, it took him a while. I think it was later they realized, well, something's up with this girl. I don't know, but and they recognized it. And when I was 33, my mother came to me and she said, in an angry way, well, I want to tell you something. I'm a prophetess. I have always been a prophetess, and I shut that off. When I was a kid. And I could see the future and think, whatever. And I was just like, oh, okay. Why are you telling me now? But it was really interesting. And my sister and I looked at each other and we're like, okay, dear mother, you never cut that off because you've always had this intuitive sense that something was happening. But then what I realized from that and from my grandmother was that I have a rich lineage, and I started to kind of look into that because that lineage of mediumship or shamanistic things and healers and all of that go through both my maternal and paternal line. So I kind of researched that and I was like, okay, I am not an anomaly, right? But it was interesting. So, that's really there were just these key moments that kind of culminated at some point in my life, which I can't even, there were just these segments where I always knew that I was going to a new plateau, right? It was like climbing a ladder. And then I just started in my sound healing sessions, I started singing. I started using my voice more. I started to buy equipment and the microphones and all of that. And it just kind of came to, you need to do this. You need to get this program on your computer because you're going to be, this is a message. These are divine light transmissions. They are encoded. And then I started making the sacred artifacts, which are also encoded. And just kind of really now at the point of it's time to get all of that out into the world. It's time for everybody, really, but it's time to do the work that you came here to do. And then the more that I just stepped into that role, then the more it just began to unfold more rapidly and synchronicities came in. And, I would meet certain people and have certain opportunities and everything. So that's kind of where I am now. And I realize even just over the last couple of months, I've been a little bit in a cocoon because I've been, there's like an initiation, like even a higher level initiation thing happening where I've just fully like opened up to this thing. It's been quite remarkable and a little stressful at the same time, like the last several weeks with just the amount of energy that I have contained within this vessel. And everything that kind of came into alignment. I've always been doing work. You know how, there's different ways that you can connect, right? And so you have like a method. Okay, this is working for me now. This is how I connect, right? And then you might learn something else. Oh, okay, that's a little easier. This is how I'm connecting now, right? Well, I've always known that I'm always connected, but I would have like a little shield or something. Like it was just kind of like I would open the door and I would close the door, and so really it was kind of like that. Angels telling me stop opening and closing the door. It was just kind of like. Because I could do that consciously, right? And because it was just so much energy, which is why then that we're working on your nervous system, we're working on your body, right? because I would move and the energy would flow and I would be like moving and doing all this stuff. Because you have to release that which you don't need within the container, right? Because light is coming in, so you're creating space. But the thing is, you aren't all in this container. So it was really, you're in the container and you fill up because your soul essence is outside. We keep saying the soul is within us, but actually we are within the soul. And when I understood that, I'm like, oh, that is a totally different thing. Okay. But it was really about when I finally understood, it wasn't that long ago, and it wasn't that I didn't understand, it was that I accepted it. That what God is, right? I'm not separate from God. I am an individuation of God. And when I started to think about the soul essence being outside the body, what I realized was there's only one soul. And it was like, and that soul is the absolute, right? We are all one soul, but we are an individuation of the absolute, God, what have you, having a physical experience. And all of that's just been like bam, 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 you've got to accept this. It was just kind of funny. And I couldn't figure out, sometimes we have these little niggling things. I couldn't figure out why. What is it? Why do I not want to let go of whatever this is, right? And well, I finally let go. I finally was doing. I kept saying, "I let it go. I release. Whatever." And then it happened. So when it happened, everything just, it was cohesive. I can't even explain it. It's just like I am open. I'm always open. I am a part of that. But then it was also getting used to that.
To let go, to surrender. This is the challenge of life for the identity, for it seeks to maintain its zone of comfort at all costs, its position of safety, its appearance above all else, all in the vein of complete acceptance by the external world. But to let go, to surrender, is saving grace, the healing balm, that which surpasses human understanding. For only therein does the soul have the opportunity to become fully realized within form. Oh no, death is not the call for the ego, but rather the contrary. There is indeed purpose for which the egoic identity serves. Life in abundance requires but proper alignment of this aspect of self, relative to the divine beingness of the boundless, infinite whole. Now, here's the caveat. Surrender requires trust. How does one recognize that what they seek to yield to can be trusted?
I have always trusted it, because it was really just a part of my life, and I knew there was a reason. And since the angels were always there, I I always felt support. Like, I never recognized what it was. I always felt this support. I always felt this protection and safety, no matter what was happening. And that is always, it's always there. It's always been there. They've actually saved my life a couple times. And I think it was, well, she needs to be around, so we better do something right. Uh, apparently, yeah. So it's always been there. And even when fear came up, I would always do it in fear, no matter what it was. And I still sometimes get hesitancy, not as much anymore. And I would say now, no, because I feel like I fully have stepped into who I am. And have also stepped into the acknowledgement that everyone's not going to like me. Everyone's not going to understand what it is I'm doing because they're not in the same space, or they're not in a place within their life where that is in resonance yet. Right. And so I've stepped into that space of freedom and realized that I feel free. I feel unencumbered. I don't feel like that there are any restrictions. I don't feel like I have any resistance. I think if there's one thing I'm still working on, is kind of like the monetary resource
Yeah.
but I'm still working on that, because what I realize, and I keep letting that go, I was like, no, when you kind of put your desire out there and you are following that divine track, right, that, and you kind of, you really pay attention to divine synchronicities and divine inspirations and things that come in, I find that it's never a challenge, right? I always receive exactly what it is that is needed in order for me to do whatever it is, right? So there's a trust thing. So I just keep plugging along. I keep doing it, right? And no matter what I realized was, you get to the other side and you're like, I don't know what I was afraid of, right? Trust and faith, whatever that faith may rely on, right? I mean, I believe in God. I know, but and it's funny because I always knew God, but the God is just the word, right? It's a name that people have given. And so I would call it God, God. But I knew within myself in the background that it was something else, so much more than you're explaining to me, right? And so for me, it's really the recognition that there is a God, but God is not what falls under a religious interpretation, right? Whether you're looking in, you're looking through the Bible or the Bhagavad Gita, whatever that's right, or whatever religious books exist, and there are many. It's really recognizing that the all is God. We are all God, and that's a hard one, especially if you're raised in a church or what have you, because it's a whole different perspective. So for me, it's really about opening people up to the recognition that there's so much more to who you are, and that you are not this body. This is a vehicle, right? And to be able to allow people to somehow see that, to experience that. Because when you can open up that door, there's no closing it. So I had to test the waters, and I had to recognize everything for myself. If that is true, then let me experience it fully and completely, so that I know within my heart that that is true. And then there comes to a point where when you recognize that truth, then you're more open to other things, right? Oh, okay, okay, I get it, right? And even, it sounds really weird, but even though I was born open to all of this, and I did shut down like in my 20s a little bit, but they wouldn't really, as little things happened, right, to kind of keep that anger. And then I opened up again in my early 30s, fully. But even though that's my life, my early life, I still didn't necessarily believe it. And that's the funny thing. There was a part of me that disbelieved what was happening. And I mean, how can that be? I mean, when you think about it, there was just some little thing, right? And I keep saying, how could that be? I've seen and spoken with ghosts. I've seen, whatever. I was a paranormal investigator, still am, but I haven't been out. But I've done all of this work. I'm a medium. And you're doing all of these things, but how can you like do all of these things and still question or not really believe it's happening? Isn't that bizarre? But at some point, you have to hold the belief, or at least you have to trust. But I really think that at some point you have to believe, you have to trust, and you have to have faith. Those are the three key things. And the key thing, though, even with those three, the very first thing that really I think has to happen before you can just set yourself free is you have to trust yourself. And many people do not trust themselves. And, one of the other things that I really had to understand was that I had to stop seeking external validation because I had to be able to validate everything happening within myself, because that's the part that wasn't necessarily trusting or believing. I would ask my teacher, so this happened. And he'd say, oh, yeah. And he'd explain. I went, oh, phew, okay. Right, I'm not crazy. But it's so weird because I know that. But yeah, those little things. And so now none of that exists. I would have to say that doesn't exist for me any longer. I really have found my sovereignty. That was one of the things, one of the phrases that the angels they wanted me to mention. They would say this a lot. It's like human beings love to muddy up the waters when God has made it expressly simple. And people, and this is kind of funny. It's not against anyone, but it was just kind of funny because I'm always explaining this to people. There are people that do channeling and all of this. They have their rituals and they have all of this that's all lined up what they do and light a candle and do all of this stuff, right? And before my work, I'm just like, "Oh," and it just starts, right? And they're kind of like, and I'll put protection up over here, okay, because I'm going to mention that. Um, and I was like, my relationship with angels, they've always been around me, so they're right here, right? It's like I'm sitting here talking to you, I just talk to them, right? Anything else that you do, you're creating a barrier of some sort. And that's also related to fear, right? So the short little story, every course that I took, I took like your general shamanism courses and all of this. Um, and every course that I took, even Reiki, had some aspect of protection in it, right? That you learned. And at some point, the angels were like, you don't need protection. It is your light, right? So I took a class in Brujeria with my teacher, which was like a magic class. And I didn't like the term Brujeria or witch or anything. That was from my upbringing. It was always like, oh my God. Right? So, but the angels were like, oh no, take the class. So I took the class. And one of the things was, which was really funny, the angels, they tricked me. They taught me the lesser banishment ritual, which is a magician thing, right? But they left out the pentagrams. They said, okay, here you go. You can use this to create like a space. They literally taught me that. I wrote it all down and I would use that. So here I am in the Brujeria workshop and he's like, well, lesser banishment ritual. And he was teaching it. And I'm like, I literally said, you tricked me. I had been doing the lesser banishment ritual without the drawing of the pentagrams because I knew that would elicit some form of fear at that time. Right? So, and I don't use that any longer. But so we're taking, at the end of the course, we had to pass like this little exercise. So he said, I'm going to take you outside. I'm going to draw a white circle. You're going to stand in the white circle. He gave us a word and an action, which was supposed to dispel negative entities, right? He taught us that. So I was kind of scared, right? So we go out and I was sitting in my circle and I was sitting there. I don't know what to do. This doesn't feel right. What he taught me doesn't feel right. I don't know what to do. And I was scared, and the angel said, Phyllis, all they said was, be who you are. So I stood up and I was like, started speaking in light language and doing something. And I had no clue. It was just flowing through, right? And then I stood there. And so he did what he did, right? And I hear all these people out in the distance and they're doing the little action and yelling the word, right? And I'm thinking, I'm doing something wrong because nothing's come to me, right? And then I saw my teacher and these two people walking and they stopped and he's looking at me. Huh. Already he continues to walk, right? So we went back in and he said, what was your experience? So I raised my hand. So this is silly me, right? I raised my hand. I said, I think I did something wrong because I didn't have any experience. Nothing came to me. He looked at me. He said, Phyllis, you did everything right. He said, you cast your light so far. Remember where I was standing? That was the periphery of your circle. Nothing could get in to you. And he said, everybody that was in your sphere, they didn't experience anything either. And then I've got chills. And then I was like, oh, oh, okay. Yeah, right. It was hysterical. But after that, I realized I I just need to be me fully and completely. I don't need protection, right? We don't need protection. And the angels used to say, Jesus went into leper colonies and he didn't don a mask and a hazmat suit and gloves before he went in, right? And I was like, oh, yeah, what's that about? Kind of they're explaining that's exactly what you're doing, right? You're casting your light. And so I can dive right into my work and I don't worry about any of that.
But it does stand that fear has two perspectives: that which is evoked internally within the self, and that which one seemingly has the power to evoke externally in others when so engaged. How does one effectively move through all facets of fear?
This area, there's a lot of churches and things and very beautiful people, right? But there were people that would come to me, even just say for Reiki, that were a little terrified, but they were right. And I'm like, this is Reiki, this is right. And there were people that called me like a witch, or I must be doing black magic, or these things. And at that time, when people would say that, I would be like, am I? It's just kind of like, and then I would be like, no, I'm not. Just like back in Sunday school, I'd still carry that with me, right? But it was like, no, that's not true. That's on you. And I remember sitting down with a good friend and I was telling her about a session I had just had, and this angel came in and was doing, this energy stuff. And I was explaining this whole story to her. And then she's like, really, really? And she's talking. And then she looks at me and she said, was it an angel of light or an angel of darkness? And I kind of leaned back and I looked at her for a second, maybe a couple heartbeats. And I was like, an angel of light. Yeah. And she went, oh, okay, good. So it's so funny. And it's fun to be able to talk to you like this and just share all this, because I know there's so many people that have probably had this happen. There's so many people that might think this as well, that might listen to this. It's just kind of like, if you are here at this time, wake up. Follow the divine inspirations and so forth. There is absolutely nothing to fear, because you are not this body, right? This is a vehicle, right? You are here for higher purpose. We're all here for a higher purpose. And things are unfolding and breaking down now and dismantling, and there's all of these things happening, and the earth is doing her part in various things, right? So of displacement. Yeah. So all of these things are happening, and people are starting to have recognition and wake up to things, and they're starting to seek people that can help them, right? So the biggest thing is, I just, even if you have fear, just keep moving forward.
Moving forward in the face of fear can at times be easier said than done. When in relationship, there seemingly exists the ever-present perceived potential for rejection, especially when two have grown along divergent paths as evolution is concerned. How does one effectively navigate the slippery slopes of relating while continuing to do one's own inner work?
There were a couple different things. So the angels helped with that a lot. So it was like I was always off to a class or a seminar or a workshop or something, because it was just like knowledge. I was in a feeding frenzy for a while there. And, my husband came to me and said, well, I don't see you often, type of thing. I'm not. So what I recognized was that in a relationship, a partnership, a marriage, what have you, husband, wife, husband, partner, it doesn't matter what it is, but your partner, you can both have separate lives, but there needs to be a center core of being where you come together in the things that you both enjoy and think, that type of thing. So I had to sit back and recognize that and then really think hard about what that was. And so then it's been fine. And I also cut back on all that, all the courses and things like what I was doing. And I would say, okay, just maybe a couple times per year, I'm going to do something. My husband's really, really supportive, but he's not, he says, I don't have a spiritual bone in my body as far as that, right? But it was funny because once I asked the angels and I said, love my husband to death, but why did I marry him? And they gave me this vision. They said that he's your Rock of Gibraltar. And so he was standing next to this big rock that I was like, and he was holding the string that was wrapped around the rock, and I was up like a helium balloon. And then I went, oh. And my recognition, though, I was telling them the story, and my recognition was when I looked at him, all of a sudden he morphed into the Franciscan monk, and I got it. He's already been self-realized but he's in this lifetime for me be able to do the work that I'm doing, and he is just holding down the fort, and he is grounding me so that I can do the work. And he has told me before, I don't understand what it is that you do. Okay, this is the full phrase. He said, I don't understand what the hell it is you do, but you must be damn good at it. And I was like, God, I will take that. I'm gonna make a t-shirt. So then I recognize that he's very proud of me. He doesn't understand what I do, but he recognizes how it's helping people and benefiting people. He's recognizing by hearing what people are saying about my work. And even though he doesn't understand it, he knows that it's a big thing, it's beneficial, whatever else, and he is supportive of it. So I mean, you can't ask for any more than that, right? But he's given me freedom, we'll put it that way, to pursue who I am, to do what it is that I do. Yeah, and that's really it. But in a relationship, you still have to keep relating. So you just have to find the common ground, and you just have to pay attention to that, right? Um, and I find ways, it's not that I don't bring my full self and my spirituality into the relationship because that's who I am. You can't not, right? Because all of that is how you're when you are awakened or ascended or what have you, it's really about enlightening, right? Allowing your true and divine self to express itself fully in the world through this physical body. And so if you are expressing fully and truly into the world, then that's going to be in your relationships, in your work and your travels and whatever else it is that you do. I had that fear in the past, like, oh my God, is this going to ruin my marriage? Whatever relation. But that didn't happen because they grow with you. I think if you're leading by example, they don't have to be spiritual. They have to be included. The key thing that I would share is to turn any fear, anxiety, or hesitancy into excitement, because the brain doesn't know the difference. So when you are looking at going to a class or something, but you're a little scared or to do something, um, you just tell yourself, oh, if you feel something a certain way, you feel fear, to say, oh, I must be really excited. This is going to be really beneficial for me, right? So you have to learn to change it up and switch fear, hesitancy, and whatever into excitement. Right? And that's the key thing, because the ego will come forward and say, no, you shouldn't do that. You guys remember last time? Or there's something happened in your life where the ego's popping forward and it's trying to save you from being eaten by the saber-toothed tiger, which doesn't exist any longer, right? That's the old limbic brain. So so when you feel that, you're like, oh, I would say, oh, I must be excited. This is going to be good, right? And then I'll go into it, and then my ego at the end of it will be like, oh, well, I guess that was okay. You didn't die. I mean, it's that type of thing. So really that is it. A lot of people, because of their background, they live in fear of really doing things, of pursuing things, of investigating, right? Of exploring. Because they feel that if I were to do that, what are people going to think of me? What is my church going to say, right? I'm going to be discommunicated or something. Yeah. So you're not here for anyone else. You're not here to please anyone else. You're not here to live someone else's life. You're not here to live someone else's expectations for you. You are here to do whatever you desire to do and to really follow your true path and purpose. And in order to figure out what that is, you've got to explore. You've got to investigate things. You've got to follow your heart's desire, your intuition, irregardless of what other people say.
Absolutely phenomenal. Infinite love and blessings to you, Phyllis Anne Douglass, for serving as our inaugural guest upon this platform. Your warmth, openness, and candor have assisted in laying a foundation which will serve to highlight the path for all who endeavor to make this beautifully divine journey home to self. Thank you. We offer infinite gratitude to all who have chosen to receive this sharing. Your arrival here is no coincidence, as there are indeed no accidents. Know that all which has been seen and heard has been received on a level that reaches into the very multidimensional fabric of your beingness. Know that we are here in support of our collective evolution. To all who are so inclined, we can be reached via the contact information provided within the description below. And should you feel moved to financially support all that we seek to bring forward, including more sharings such as this, donation details are provided as well. Again, to every viewer, thank you for joining us. Please be sure to like, subscribe, and share so that more beautiful souls might have the opportunity to receive as you have. And as we depart, do we leave you with 3 words to take seat within your knowing. Love is all. Be well. Namaste.